Welcome back. This is The Pulse. We're still discussing issues shaping up for the day, and we're doing very in-depth analysis of those issues. Let's take you to the Data Protection Commission. They're mandated by law to ensure information about you and I shared with institutions such as banks, schools, mobile network providers, and so on. And so how relevant is this work to us? Patricia Adusei-Poku is Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission, and she now joins me in the studio for more on this topic. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Very refreshing to have you on the Pulse. So first, let's understand the kind of job you do at the Data Protection Commission.
Okay, so the commission has been established to primarily protect the personal data of individuals. And when we say personal data, it's information about you that describes you, that uniquely identifies you, is protected. And when we say protected, we're talking about protecting it as a fundamental human right. Reason why that is necessary to be enacted in law is that there's increased use of new technology and ICTs. The pace of digitization is such that a lot of data that is personal to us and uniquely identifies us is all becoming electronic and kept in the cyberspace. This obviously covers every information about us. So we talk about the manual files in the filing systems that historically were able to be controlled, stored, locked away. Now we are increasing the pace of digitizing this information such that it's hard for an individual to control how that information concerning them is used. Such information is very useful to businesses that, to the extent that on the external landscape to the world, to Ghana, international landscape, personal data is described as the new oil or the new gold because of the value that's been placed on it and the value it is to business. Because the business is valued according to the data that is held, and they rely on the data to make their business decisions and the business planning. And so decision that is made based on your personal data should allow you to exercise your rights under some act of parliament to ensure that it's used in a way that is legal.
So fairly, I mean, it's my right for my data to be protected, but why should that be important to me? I mean, why should I protect my data?
It's important to you because it's information that uniquely identifies you. So your data is basically you in a soft version. What is your profile? Who are you? What's your height? What's your eye color? What do you do? What do you like? What do you belong to in a club? What clubs do you belong to? What do you eat? What decisions do you make online? What do you like to buy? Are all important information for businesses, and commercially it has value. And so if you don't have a right to contribute to the way it is used, then that can become a problem,
right?
Because it can impact you negatively, especially if someone steals your identity and uses it to represent you. So you know, on Facebook now we have people complaining that their identity has been taken and now has been represented in a different way. Decisions are being made about them that they haven't authorized or contributed to, so much so that sometimes it's hard to control. And so this act of parliament enables you to contribute to the way the decisions about you is made, even legitimately, by businesses. And if it's being used in ways that you don't accept or disagree with, it gives you a channel, a means to complain and to also assert your right as an individual to ask for it to be corrected or amended or updated or changed or completely erased.
All right. So your duty is basically to protect I mean, information about me, information about people in the country, so people don't abuse it.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, lately we've seen instances of people sharing people's private information, and people think that their privacy are being, you know, infringed upon. Now, how do you monitor how some of these activities going on?
Okay, so it's a good question. This is why, as a part of the Act of Parliament, the Data Protection Act, which is also known as Act 843, Ghana, has established the commission, which is an office that would actually lead on how the country as a state implement our privacy program on a national scale. Now, on the entity level, business by business, public sector, government offices, they all have to register with the commission so that we know of their existence. And once they are on our radar, we are responsible for setting a criteria based on which individuals who are described by law as data protection supervisors, globally they are known as data protection officers, will be trained. So there's a global deficit of these skilled professionals. So Ghana is training its own data protection professionals based on the Ghana Act, but meeting the international best practice standards. So that these individuals we will have on our radar and work with to implement privacy programs for each entity. And when I say privacy programs, these are like a framework that we provide to the individuals that will help them implement a compliance roadmap to make the individuals or entities that have registered with the commission accountable to the people. So we publish what the criteria is. We are raising national awareness. And what I'm doing here today is part of the national awareness, helping people to understand what the entities should be doing, so that when they are not doing what their obligations are by law, you and I can hold them accountable. And because, for example, if we use public sector or government agencies as an example, they hold volumes of personal data of hundreds and thousands of people. So each individual cannot, speak on behalf of the thousands, although you can, the power you hold will not be enough to get a big entity to change their behavior. So the commission is there to exercise this right on your behalf, to hold them accountable to what they are obligated by law to do, so that if they don't do it, we can send a determination to them to announce that what they're doing is not compliant, to enable individuals like you and I to then, based on that determination, exercise their rights. So you have rights that are listed for you under the Act that businesses and entities must recognize, and then ensure that they are, setting their systems and organizational measures in compliance with the Act, so that it respects your rights as an individual. And when they haven't done that, we will support you to hold them accountable.
One of the biggest conversations that have come up has been the fact that we give a lot of information to these global giants like Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social media networks you can talk about. And the issue is, what do they use this information for? Even Google and all of that, we give a lot of information to these people. Does it come under your umbrella? Do you have jurisdiction over these global communication networks as to how to protect the information that we release to these people?
Yes, we do. So in Ghana, the Data Protection Act binds the whole republic. So every entity or even an individual that decides to collect volumes of personal data to process in a personal way should fall within the scope of this act. And the examples you gave are multinational organizations like the likes of the big social media entities like Facebook, Google, etc. They have to comply with the international best practice standard and with the local jurisdiction, which is the Ghana Data Protection Act. Between the Ghana Data Protection Act and other countries, as we have something we call the international cooperation. And so other countries will cooperate and are now cooperating with Ghana, because we have the law, to agree on how to deal with these multinationals and how they process data in the cyberspace. So they comply with international best practice and with the local law wherever they are. Example,
we've all come to agree that, sometimes it's become very difficult to control some of these giants, especially how they use our information. How do you do that? Because it doesn't look like a very easy thing to do.
So that's why I brought a copy of the Act here. It outlines clearly what all the rules in the 99 sections of this Act that they should comply with. So this is clear. It is not very different from what we have in Europe and in other countries. So they are kind of consistent internationally with what are the basic minimum baseline requirements that they should meet. They need to understand this and then comply with it by meeting the requirements clearly. For example, one of the critical things that it says in here, you must register with the Data Protection Commission. So even if you're multinational, you want to operate operate within the Ghana jurisdiction and collect data of Ghanaian citizens or public of Ghana, you need to register with the Data Protection Commission so we know you exist. And then we can kind of check whether you're complying with our regulation.
It's very obvious that, I mean, the law is one thing and the implementation is another. And it comes with enforcement. I mean, you're supposed to enforce or ensure that they abide by this Act 843. In the event that there is a breach, which is possible, how do you deal with it?
So first we make a determination if it comes to our notice that there's been a breach or non-compliance or an incident. Usually it will come to our radar through complaints by citizens or tip-off or by a random audit. Okay. Whichever means it comes to our attention, we have the power to write to the entity or to ask the entity to take some action. And all of these kind of actions that we can force them to take are part of the enforcement action that we're empowered to ask them to do. So we can sanction you, we can prosecute you, we can ask you to take certain specific action that you need to comply with, and then we have the power to stop you from processing the data altogether. So we can basically stop your business from running.
So what's the sanction regime? I mean, can you elaborate on the sanction regime? What exactly, if you say sanction, what exactly are you talking about?
So we can one of them is basically stopping you from processing. It's a sanction under the Act. Or we can prosecute you and get you fined by a court action. So those are like the last resort kind of sanctions that we would normally use. Normally we would check if you're complying with the requirements of the Act and then order you to comply if you're not. For example, if you don't train your staff and we find out that your staff are, abusing or non-compliant, we can ask you to train them to the standard that we expect you to train them if they are actively processing personal data. Okay.
Wow. So, but certainly you can't do this alone. I'm sure you are in collaboration with other ID institutions like the NIA, health insurance, birth and death registry. How is the collaboration like?
Okay, so there's a big Ghana national agenda to transform the state. So the national transformation agenda is such that different government entities are taking part in different ways of transforming the state. So the NIA, by example, you've given that as an example, are digitizing our ID. You have agencies like the National NITA for the technology. We have other entities that are taking other positive action who are all collaborating with us in the effort to meet the requirements of the digitization program. Okay. We have the National Cybersecurity Secretariat that are doing a lot of work to secure the cyberspace for Ghana. They are in very close collaboration with the Commission.
I'm particularly happy to hear about the cybersecurity office, but how do you do your monitoring? Because earlier you made the point that you would take action when you get tip-offs, but sometimes you don't have to wait for tip-offs. You have to, look for the information yourself. How do you do your monitoring so that you can be able to detect some of these breaches in the system? Okay,
so we are in close collaboration with the police. All of this period till the end of September, we are doing some awareness work with the cyber security angle of the police, the department of the police that is responsible for cyber security and data protection. They've nominated police in all regions to be trained by the Data Protection Commission so that they are at par with us in terms of what they should be expecting organizations to adhere to. Right. And then beginning of October this year onwards, we are going to be randomly visiting sites and inspecting compliance statuses. And if you don't meet it, we will then commence enforcement action.
Okay, so my name is Aisha Ibrahim. I work with JoyNews. How safe is my data?
well, I cannot state right now how safe it is, but it means that if you're looking at your employee data, we need to work with Joy FM to check their status of compliance to see how they are saving your data and safeguarding it. When you ask blankly how safe your data is, we are looking at your activity on social media, you as a patient in hospital, you as an employee, and all of these areas are you in different ways that are being protected generally.
So I need to take steps to ensure that my data is protected. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you need to understand your rights under the Act as an individual.
Okay.
Holding entities accountable is the Commission's responsibility. So you as an individual should understand what your rights are under the Act. Some of your rights are the right to object, the right to say no to giving information, the right to demand an explanation as to what is the purpose for collection. And if you don't get a satisfactory response to exercising your right, you have also the right to complain to the Commission or to ask the Commission to look into the processing of your personal data. This is what we encourage all individuals in Ghana to understand. And then when we have that kind of information from you, telling us which aspect of you, say your cyber activity or you as a patient or you as a student, that is not being protected, we can hold the entity that we describe as data controllers accountable on your behalf.
Okay, so as an individual, where do I start from to ensure that my data is protected? That if I go to the hospital and they ask me to provide information, do I have to find out whether they are registered with the Data Protection Commission before I give out information, or
you have
exactly
a right.
what am I supposed to do?
You have a right to ask that specific question, whether they're registered with the Commission or not.
Okay.
You have a right to ask what is happening with your data. Why are they asking? Who else will have access to it? How often they'll have access to your data? How long do they intend to keep your data? And when they've finished taking care of you, when will they delete the data? Every data has a life cycle. The point of collection to when you dispose of it. And it's not a forever kind of thing. That is illegal. Every data collection must have a retention period. And the retention period is how long they're going to keep it. And they should be ready to give you all of that information before you give them the consent to collect. If you're not satisfied, you have a right to decline consent. Sometimes you need to be informed that when you do decline consent, it may affect the service that you will get. But they have the obligation legally to ensure that they have that information available to give to you on request.
Okay, many thanks to you, Patricia Adusei-Poku, quite an education there. She's Executive Director of the Data Protection Commission, and she says that you have the right not to give out your information. If you think you're not satisfied with how your information is going to be handled, don't give it out, and always insist and ensure that where you're giving your information, whichever institution is registered with the Data Protection Commission. Thank you so much for the education. We're grateful for your time.